We will see if he will get some tactical compromise from the Israeli government the next few days. Everyone hoping to come out winner in this thing. But in the end of the day, it is the peace that is being victimized. It's peace process that's being held hostage, and it's a future sovereign, contiguous, independent Palestinian state that is being destroyed by this very process of colonization in the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
All right, Marwan, afraid we're out of time. Going to leave it there. Our senior political analyst, Marwan Bashara, talking with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll be back with more news from the Americas a little later on in the news hour, including winner takes all. Haiti's presidential candidates kick off their campaigns ahead of next month's runoff vote.
You're with the Al Jazeera News Hour. Here's a reminder of our developing stories. Witnesses have told Al Jazeera at least 70 people have been killed during demonstrations across Libya. They say security forces in the city of Benghazi and many other towns in the eastern part of the country have left the streets. People there are calling for Libya's leader Muammar Gaddafi to step down. Security remains tight across Bahrain's capital after shots were fired on anti-government protesters on Friday. The wounded were then taken to the city's main Salmaniya hospital, where protesters have gathered outside, defying a ban on demonstrations in the country. The whistleblowing website WikiLeaks says it plans to release more U.S. diplomatic cables on Bahrain in the coming hours. London's Telegraph newspaper is reporting that one details a warning from Bahrain's king to the U.S. military that opposition groups in the island state were receiving training from Hezbollah in Lebanon with help from Syria. King Hamad made the claim in a July 2008 meeting with U.S. General David Petraeus, but the cable says the king admitted that he had no proof. Well, Britain has revoked licenses for the export of certain weapons to Bahrain as well as Libya. The licenses cover items such as tear gas and ammunition that may be used to suppress anti-government protests. Sonia Gallego takes a look at the UK's arms sales to the Middle East.
Images that shocked a nation. Pictures of police in Bahrain violently suppressing peaceful protests drew condemnation from the West.
Across the Middle East, we call for the right to peaceful protest and, of course, effective economic development and more open and flexible political systems.
But no mention that some of the tear gas used in the Bahrain protests may have come from Britain. Calls for peace are far away from the gritty reality that is the weapons trade. Deals cut at arms fairs such as these are the norm, reaping billions of dollars for defense contractors. Across the Middle East, arms sales are a lucrative trade for the UK. As well as tear gas, they provided Bahrain with aircraft cannons and assault rifles. For Libya, projectile launchers and crowd-controlled ammunition were approved for sale. Deals to Algeria included combat and military utility helicopters worth $430 million. Egypt's list included components for armored personnel carriers and submachine guns. And for Saudi Arabia, sniper rifles and small arms ammunition were among last year's sales. Britain is currently the 5th largest seller of weapons in the world, and that potentially conflicts with its diplomatic standing.
The weapons they're selling are likely to be used. The people who want to buy the weapons generally want to use them. And this is the nature of the arms trade that the government has given such a heavy commitment to supporting.
And while the weapons trade provides such a profitable paycheck, there may be hesitation to clamp down on it. The UK has placed sales of arms to Bahrain under urgent review. But until it stops arming governments with the means to crush dissent, critics say its calls for democracy may sound a little hollow to those suffering the end result. Sonia Gallego, Al Jazeera, London.
In Iran, thousands of government supporters gathered to call for the execution of opposition leaders following last week's anti-government rallies. During Friday prayers, a senior cleric said the opposition had lost its reputation among the people. He called for restrictions on opposition leaders Mehdi Karoubi and Mir Hossein Mousavi to prevent them from communicating with their supporters. And in neighboring Iraq, the government there has imposed a curfew in some parts of the country in response to angry protests. In Basra, in the south, protesters blocked a bridge. They want the provincial governor to quit, and they're demanding better services and jobs. In the city of Kut, protests ended with some demonstrators storming a regional government headquarters. At least one teenager was killed in the clashes that followed, and the city does remain under curfew. The U.S. Secretary of State has called on Pakistan to stop encouraging anti-American sentiment. Hillary Clinton's remarks come amid anger in Lahore. That's over the killing of 2 Pakistanis by a U.S. embassy employee. Raymond Davis says he acted in self-defense when he shot the men last month. The United States believes he has diplomatic immunity and is putting pressure on Pakistan to release him. Zain Basravi has more from Lahore.
This busy intersection here in the center of Lahore is where Raymond Davis admits he shot and killed 2 Pakistani men in January. And as Friday prayers have come to a close, worshippers have come out of the mosques and into the streets to protest against what happened here, which, it has to be said, still isn't exactly clear. The crowd here includes religious groups as well as political parties that are using this case as an opportunity to voice their anger against American policy in the region that they say has caused instability inside Pakistan. The government here is worried that if it doesn't do something soon to subdue the anger, then protests like these could be seen across the country in much larger numbers. The crowds here, these organizations, these groups have a great deal of street power and a great deal of sway with the public. They've also made attempts to stall any kind of deal being made that would allow blood money or compensation to be paid to the grieved families in exchange for Davis's freedom. Any deal like that simply wouldn't sit well with an angry public that is calling for Davis to be hanged. For protesters here, it's one thing for the United States and Pakistan to make deals over major policy, but an American citizen gunning down 2 men in the street, even in self-defense, is just one step too far.
Yoweri Museveni says that he's confident of extending his 25-year reign as Ugandan leader following Friday's presidential election. Few voters took part and several clashes broke out between supporters of opposing candidates. AlJazeera's Mohammed Adaw has more.
The Ugandan military on patrol in the east of the country. They were called in to end the fighting between supporters of Uganda's defense minister, Beatrice Wabudea, and her parliamentary opponent, Nandala Mafabi. Journalists were caught up in the violence. This reporter was shot by security forces. Julius Odeke says he was shot when he refused to hand over his camera.
The windows were closed. I refused to open. At last I had a gunshot and I started feeling myself paralyzed. I saw blood.
And in the capital, Kampala, vote counting commenced immediately. Polling stations closed. Here, opposition supporters cheer every vote for President Museveni's opponents. Tempers flared earlier on in the day when most voting booths did not open on time. Uganda is a fledgling democracy, and this is just its 6th election in 49 years. And presented with the opportunity to vote once again, many Ugandans are doing so with a deep conviction.
I voted for Museveni straight away. He has given us peace.
With the message going through,